simple thing that went almost unrecognized and untalked about is the fitting world and, you know, the interchangeable parts moving from 6 irons to 7 irons. And while that sounds like a, you know, a minute thing, what happened when you did that is all of a sudden you stopped exposing a lot of golf clubs that players couldn't hit farther.
All right, everybody, here we are. Special edition of No Putts Given, because Chris Voshall was available. And anytime this man is available, we do whatever we can to get him here. And we are talking 923, new launch, all that stuff. We're going to go through all the details, answer your questions, ask you questions. I don't know. What else are we going to do, Tony?
Let's do, we're gonna do a speed round at the end. Let's do something new. We'll make a
speed round. Does it involve this, Tony? Does it involve this?
Ooh, nice.
No,
this is an
maybe
MP64 3-iron. I broke it out because it hopefully reminds you of something we may get to talk about today. So, first question though, Vosh, how do you like the outfit?
Dude, this is the best looking podcast I've ever seen. You know, you got Tony going all Gary Player on us. You got Chris with the bandy. You got Runbirds everywhere. I'm the underdressed.
The only Mizuno hat I own.
I do have the tour van shirt going, so I got that going.
Oh, yeah.
So.
All right.
No, this is a fantastic look, guaranteed to increase ratings when you put that bandy star on there.
Anchor down, baby.
There we
Anchor
go.
down. So and let them know.
We need all the support we can get going into where the grounds we're about to walk on. So it's gonna be an interesting weekend. Let's savor the 3-1 record we have right now. We're already hit the over on our win total for the year.
Was it 2.5?
It was 2.5.
So comfortably over. Tony, let's dive in. What do we want to talk about?
We have got, we're going to talk JPX, but we
Let's
have
do that.
5 new iron models. My count correct there?
That's correct.
A new hybrid, and just for the hell of it, some blue wedges. So like, man, that's a lot. What's going on?
Dude, this is the time of year when it's fun to talk about the stuff that's been in the oven for a while. So yeah, new JPX line. That's always exciting for us because JPX is where we love to show off a lot of new technologies, a lot of distance generating things, and then works all the way down to the tour. So golf club, the JPX tour, with an awesome heritage of a ton of play. Already have some 923s in tour on tour right now, which is exciting. So just a ton to talk about. Coming off the Mizuno Pro, which is basically like as clean and classic as you can get. JPX is fun because there's some bling on these things.
What does, and I this kind of popped in my head today, and I'm like, I have no recollection of this, but what does JPX stand for? Doesn't actually stand for anything.
Either. We know what MP is. Mizuno Professional, right?
Mizuno Pro, right? Exactly.
Pro being short for professional, sure.
I went for a long time of not answering that question, but I feel like we're long enough into the life that we might as well go ahead and answer that question. Tony, you've been to Japan. You've experienced the culture over there and how things get named fun
Lost.
stuff. Well, JPX came from our Japan market. It was a brand over in Japan long before it was a brand in the Western world. And, of course, we start thinking, what does JPX stand for? Japanese performance extreme, something like that. We wish it was something even that lame/cool. I believe the actual answer is joy, passion, excitement is where it came from.
So good.
That's the best.
So good.
How do we not have a t-shirt with JPX like joy, passion, excitement?
You could have like 3 emojis, one for each one, right?
Yes. Yes.
So that is really bringing JPX into the modern world right there.
Exactly.
Wow. All right. There's one trivia question down.
Now we're in.
Coming. Yeah.
Did not see that coming.
Yeah.
Nope. Not a chance.
I guess we're done.
There we go.
From there?
That's a wrap. Back to the MP64 3-iron.
Right.
Yeah. So let's dive right in here. And I want to start, we're going to start with hot metal.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into the specifics, I think You know, it's interesting to me, maybe you can talk about it a little bit, but this has kind of become the money maker in the Mizuno lineup. We tend to think of you guys as like, hey, these are a pure forging, better players company. You've been kind of trying to shake that reputation for a while, but
Mhm.
like, where are you now? How important has hot metal become to your business?
If you wanna talk the business side of the world, it's funny how much it differs from the perception of the world. You know, Mizuno still has the perception of small players forging. It's like, that's what Mizuno does. That's why we're here. That's why we have jobs. That's what put Mizuno on the map. But since hot metal started, you know, and again, even with JPX, we had JPX 800, JPX 825, 850. The 900 was the one that took on the badge of hot metal. And that was the start of the use of chromoly, a material that, you know, gives you a lot more ball speed. The look got the way it should be. And ultimately, it's turned into where if you look at our number 1 selling model is hot metal, our number 2 selling model is hot metal pro, and it's not even close. Like, it's unbelievable how valuable they are just at to Mizuno's business, but also, you know, in the fitting world. To think of the fact that Mizuno's top 2 clubs are not forgings is really a shocker for a lot of people. I actually got into a spirited debate with somebody the other day who did not believe me that Forged was outsold by Hot Metal Pro, and I gave the numbers that not only is it outsold, it's outsold close to 2 to 1, so it's a ridiculous thing.
I don't think, yeah, I never would have seen that coming. Especially looking at some of the where the JPX, the cast side of the JPX lineup was once upon a time. So
It will say it had some missteps before it found its direction.
Yeah, and I think too, like you mentioned there, what's interesting is the heritage and perception versus the reality, right?
Mhm.
And balancing those things going forward because you don't want to lose the DNA, I guess, so to speak, of like I said, what put you guys on the map, the MP 29s,
Right.
14s, 33s, a lot of us that go back to that and you see that up to and through the return of copper
Mhm.
underlay that we had in the TN 87s and seeing that stuff come back. So I guess how do you balance those with maintaining that heritage people that that fell in love with Mizuno, they fell in love with that single piece forging. They didn't
Yeah.
probably fall in love with the MX-23. I don't,
Right. I mean,
probably not,
yes.
I'll
right?
say
Like,
a couple of things happened with, and I'll go back to the JPX 900 line because that's the one where I feel like we really, you know, caught our stride. And a couple of things happened on that line that not only, you know, triggered hot metal, which was the, like I said, it was the first one that had the hot metal name on the biggest model, but also that saw the introduction of the tour model as well. So that was the first time JPX wasn't a game improvement line. JPX was a technology line, and there was a look and a thread that tied them all together. So with JPX 900, you had the tour, the forged, and the hot metal. So now when you go into the fitting studio, you know, you get into the cart, you get into wherever you know, work with your local professional to get fit. You walk in and you say, which one is for me? As opposed to, you know, I'm a good player and I'm an MP, or I'm a less good player, I'm a JPX. Which that's where when Mizuno had their distance clubs basically set in a category that was so obviously not Mizuno, it doesn't really catch its stride. But now that there's that connection, that thread that runs all the way through, now even players who
mm,
play hot metal, you could play the forged and the scoring irons. There's a look that ties them all together. There's a connection to what the tour players are using. So to me, it's utilizing that heritage and pulling that heritage to all levels of the market.
And so hot metal is your game improvement series. Pro maybe more players distance
Uh-huh.
perhaps, but you're definitely trending towards forgiveness. And a lot of times when we talk about forgiveness, the metric we use is MOI. We throw that around a lot. I think our listeners are familiar with it, but you guys don't talk about MOI much. You have a metric you use called core area.
Yep.
And can you talk about what that is and why you think it's a better measure of forgiveness than
and
a
Yeah.
Tony
traditional
slaps
metric
my
like
hand
MOI?
every time I say MOI, this,
Uh,
that. He goes, no, no, it's not forgiveness.
well,
Well,
I think
Thank you,
with
okay.
bro.
MOI, it's almost like I'm trying to think what's a good analogy to use with it, where it's like
It's
MOI
not like
is
sunscreen, is it?
I I would it's like
It is. It is.
when people use to frequency shafts, like you just bounce a shaft and you say it's this many CPM, whatever. There's a measurement of how stiff it is. It's a singular view of the forgiveness of it. Like that's a singular view of the stiffness of it at a localized area. MOI to me, and not even to me, to physics, it's the measurement of the resistance to twisting on a single axis. So if you look at the MOI of a golf club in the toe heel direction, you could make a club that's very forgiving in one direction and less forgiving in another direction because it's all based off of where the mass lives in relation to the COR passing through that axis. Sorry to get more like technical on it. But when we talk about forgiveness, we talk about two things. You're right. We talk about core area and we talk about what we call sweet area. And sweet area is basically looking at MOI on a couple of different planes. So rather than just looking at it in the toe heel direction, we measure it in the toe heel direction and the up down direction because you could easily make one very forgiving in the toe heel and really crummy in the up down. So with that, if you just look at the MOI, then you'd say, oh, this MOI is massive. But if you hit a ball high or low on the face, it's stuff. So by looking at it over those multiple axes, that's going to take into account basically that whole ellipse area of the face. So we convert basically those two MOIs into the area of an ellipse. And we say sweet area is the combined effect of toe heel and up down MOI. So there's your resistance to twisting in those two planes. So that's an MOI, or that's a forgiveness in terms of how much energy loss will there be to twist. Core area is how much energy will be transferred to the ball. So again, very similar to like a typical toe heel MOI, you can make a high COR iron where the center of the face, where the COR is measured, is through the roof. It's really high, but it drops off very quickly from there. If you just maximize that center point, it's not a true representation of how hot that club is across the entire face. So we'll map what we call a core area as well. And that's the area on the face that lives in the high COR realm. So that way, if you can combine a high COR or a high core area and a high sweet area, that's forgiveness because energy is not lost
Okay.
to twisting and also energy is transferred to the ball through COR. So I know that
Quick
was a much longer
question.
answer than you probably wanted, but yes, Rick Chris with his
I have a question. So, and we saw this in like our way long ago, right? In driver testing, you look at typical miss patterns, right?
Mhm.
Because if you hit it in the center, like I said, and it's really hot and forgiving and whatever, like where that center point is, which directly behind the geometric center of gravity, whatever the case is, fantastic. How do you take typical player misses? So
Mhm.
if I'm a 10 handicap, 12 handicap, 14 handicap, whatever the case is, and I'm probably looking, you're guesstimating, right? Hey, this type of player is probably looking at that type of an iron. Do you design those ellipses around their most typical miss areas? And secondarily, will blades make me a better ball striker? I need to know
Look,
because
we'll take these one at a time. First, first, I'd say, yeah, we absolutely look at the strike and miss patterns on different clubs in different ways. And ultimately, it's like we refer to like the angle of rotation, where typically an iron miss, even a driver miss, the same thing. Is low heel, high toe is the typical like pattern shot dispersion pattern goes like that across the face. So when you look at the
yep,
JPX line, you'll actually see a large concentration of mass high on the toe, which high on the toe is an interesting thing because it's not good for sweet spot depth or sweet spot height because it's mass high on the toe. It's not deep. It's not, way towards the toe. But what that's basically doing is it's orienting the forgiveness level, like basically the area of that ellipse that we're measuring for that core or for that sweet area, it's tilting that ellipse. So basically what it's doing is it's dialing that in more to the miss patterns of that particular player. So yes, we absolutely look at that. If you look at the Mizuno Pro world on the MP side, you don't see as much concentration of mass on the high toe. So again, it's looking at the different levels and the different clubs and focusing the mass where it needs to be on each one. That being said, the muscle backs don't have that level of forgiveness out there. So you're going to be a worse ball striker with that.
Noted,
Oh
and
my.
thank you.
All right, Chris, before we jump into kind of and break down the individual models, you've done some stuff with the new line, the JPX 923 hot metal line in particular, common technologies. What's different, new, improved, whatever phrase you want to throw at it with the new
Yeah,
lineup?
so the hot metal line in particular, the biggest thing that we're most excited about is the new material that we're using. It still is a chromoly, but it's actually what we call a nickel chromoly. So
Is
it
that named after Chris?
Thank
absolutely.
you. I've been working on this forever. Finally, I get my just due. My atomic number is what, 28, I think?
It's because you're so hot, Chris. So we
Yeah,
gotta
it is.
utilize the
You're lucky I'm not in the tub. You're lucky I'm not in the
hotness.
tub for this one.
Oh boy.
So but the addition of nickel actually is able to help us increase the strength of that material by about 35%. Strong dude. So,
Yeah.
I'd say the material that we were using before, the chromoly, we had gotten to a point where we couldn't really go any thinner because of durability. Once you start going thinner, you're gonna start getting face cracks, and you're gonna start to see CORs, creep and all those things you don't want in a
And,
set of
and
iron.
those things are bad, right? Very
Those
bad.
things are bad,
Bad.
exactly. So with the nickel chromoly, we were able to get thinner across the entire face. Thinner on the face is good for so many reasons. First, obviously, thinner face equals hotter face, higher COR, more ball speed. Second, thinner on the face means more mass to play with and more mass to put not close to the face, more mass to put around the perimeter, more mass to put in the bag. So that material really is what unlocked all of the improvements we made on our Hot Metal and our Hot Metal Pro line. And then from there, we actually added a third model within the Hot Metal family, which is the Hot Metal High Launch. And to me, that's an exciting one because while you may be tempted to call it like an SGI Super Game Improvement iron or something like that, it doesn't look the part of a Super Game Improvement iron. It features all of the distance generating technologies of a distance club, and it's built into a package that's just simply easier to launch. It's, I mean, marginally larger than the hot metal, and I say that like the only added head length is in the hosel. It's just pulled that hosel a fraction of a millimeter further away to make the actual the distance of that face a little bit longer, and it's a little bit more loft on it. And more loft is funny because that's something that the industry almost shies away from is adding loft. We added loft on that just because the number of players that are getting fit into distance golf clubs who can't handle it once you get into the, mid 20s, low 20s in loft, which oftentimes is a 6 iron, 5 iron.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So now it gets you into, again, that fitting world of which hot metal is right for me. So the technology is shared between all three of them with the nickel chromoly material, our seamless cup face design, our what else do we do? Our V chassis on there that's gonna make sure it feels really powerful as well. All those things are tied between all 3 models in the hot metal, and then it's just which one puts you in the proper launch window.
In the presentation, you talked about, right, the lofts on HL being a little weaker, and this is within the hot metal lineup. This is the one that fascinates me because we
Mhm.
see this time and time again in our testing where we look at the numbers and the idea that hey, the story the industry tells is yes, these are strong lofts. We've jacked them, but we put the center of gravity low and deep, and so you're going to get it high, you're going to hit it high, and you're going to land soft. You're going to hold greens, all this stuff. And we look at the numbers from our test data, and like this is not happening for a lot of
Mhm.
No,
guys.
you're
These
not.
guys
You're
are
not going to hold any
they're
greens.
they're hitting it low. They're hitting it with no spin, and the only way they're holding a green is if it's got a backstop.
Mhm.
And so I would say we see other irons in the marketplace that have taken this similar approach. Cobra F Max is one that we
Yep.
like a lot, has performed really well for us. But this is kind of the first time I've seen it in really a flagship lineup where you say, yeah, you know what? Within a lineup that actually sells, that moves the
Right.
needle for us in the marketplace, we're going to weaken these lofts. We're going to have golfers hit it higher, maybe a little shorter. We can talk about that in a bit, but one of the things that stood out to me in the presentation that you stepped us through a couple of weeks ago had a quote from Ian Fraser over at TXG. I think it was something like, this is the iron the industry has been crying out for.
Mhm.
And I think that I don't want to put try and interpret what Ian's saying, but I think he's probably speaking to the fitter's perspective where,
Right.
as you said, and as we noticed, they're guys that just don't get the performance they need with traditional current, I guess, modern, right? What is now modern game improvement, even super game improvement irons. But that in mind, fitters crying out for it. Why has the equipment industry itself sort of run away from this idea for so long?
Well, it's interesting because the easiest way to sell someone on a set of golf clubs is to be like, look, you just hit these farther, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, well, I could hit an 8 iron instead of a 7 iron. That sounds great to me. Like, I would love to do that. And it's almost been the perfect storm of things that have happened in the industry to get us to where we are. And what I mean by that is, like, a simple thing that went almost unrecognized and untalked about is the fitting world and the interchangeable carts moving from 6 irons to 7 irons. And while that sounds like a minute thing, what happened when you did that is all of a sudden you stopped exposing a lot of golf clubs that players couldn't hit farther. So with the 7 iron world, you're looking at, and again, I'll go back to, I'll talk a lot about our entire line. Like the 923 tours, the 7 iron is 34 degrees. And that's like an old school 7 iron loft, 34 degrees. When you get to the hot metal, our strongest, we're talking 28 degrees. So now you've got, what is that, 6.5 degrees
Yeah.
between, or 5.5 degrees between those.
Creeping
You're,
up on 2 clubs.
yeah,
Here, it's a club and a
absolutely.
half, more or less.
And the more important thing is you're really creeping up on a threshold loft where the inability to launch and spin gets exposed. When you're talking 28 degrees in the high 20s, this was a really fascinating study we did where we did robotic testing at every head speed from 60 miles an hour up to like 120 miles an hour. At every head speed at 28 degrees of loft, distance was further the stronger you got. So 28.5 degrees, you could still get away with it. You could still trick somebody in the fitting bay. Look, these go farther. However, the second you get stronger than that, the second you get to the 6 iron, that 28.5 goes to 27.5, 26. So you get to that 6 iron, all of a sudden you start to see, hey, that 60-mile-an-hour guy can't handle that club. Oh, all of a sudden that 70-mile-an-hour guy can't handle that club. And ultimately, so a lot of what helps us dial in these specs is on the hot metal high launch, instead of being 28.5, we're 31 degrees on that 7 iron. And that 31 degrees, if you're below 75 miles an hour on a 7 iron, you'll still hit your 7 iron farther. Or the 28.5 will go further than the 31. But the second you get to the 6 iron, you've just lost it. Your 6 iron actually went shorter. So we set up the specs so that depending on your head speed, we could put you in a set that will allow you to recognize distance gains beyond just the 7 iron. So, you hate to say that the industry pulled one over on everyone, but they kind of did. It's like you couldn't have kept going stronger and stronger and stronger if all the fitting clubs were still 6 irons. Now I just wait to see who's the first person to say, hey, guess what? We're going to expose a problem. We better switch to 8 irons. Like that could happen.
Well,
Do you think it
effectively,
will?
right? I mean,
Could that?
because and this comes up in our fitting conversations a lot. In what other industry and places do you buy 5, 6, 7, or 8 of something based on the behavior and attributes of one thing?
Right. Right.
Right? So I'm buying an entire set of irons potentially based on how one performs,
Mhm.
potentially without any
Yeah.
acknowledgement of how those other 6 or 7 perform relative to that. And it's like, hey, it'll all be okay. If this one worked, those other ones will work. But the reality is, if this one works, that guarantees me that this one works.
Right.
And that's about it.
That's right. And that's one of the things where, we've got a fitting software that accompanies our entire fitting system. That software will direct you to, you need to stop carrying this law. Like, we will say, just because this 7 worked does not mean that 6 will work for you. And I think that's something that the best fitters in the world know. Like Ian Fraser doing that fitting, he would be able to put you in a set. He would recognize where you need to drop off clubs and stuff. you go to the random big box store and it's the dude who just is reading a couple numbers. He doesn't know where that happens. So that's where it's on us as a company to help drive you through the proper fitting, because you're right. Performance of a 7 iron does not always indicate performance of a 6 iron, let alone 5 and 4 iron. Some of these 4 irons
Right.
are sub 20s. They're like 2 irons in the old timey. So, to say a, 25 handicapper, here's this 2 iron. Oh, don't worry, we put the CG back, you'll be fine. No, you're not. You're not gonna be fine.
No, you're gonna have 6 clubs that you all hit the same distance
Totally,
is what you're gonna
totally.
have.
I played with somebody like that where,
Yeah,
the
my dad.
the 5 wood went the same distance as, like, the 9 iron. It's just a slightly different trajectory.
Right.
It's
It's
kinda
like, "What do you hit? What do you hit 150 yards?" I got
everything.
13 clubs. I hit
Yeah.
150 yards."
It's funny because and that's where a simulator, you could see those distance differences because of run out. But let's just say you got a bunker 150 yards to carry, 7 clubs might land in the face of that bunker, you know?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
one of the things, Chris, I thought was also that stood out to me in the presentation was, and I don't know to what extent it's known, but your shaft optimizer, when somebody goes through that process, there is a golf ball recommendation that
Mhm.
comes with that, correct?
Yeah,
And
there
one of the
is.
things you mentioned, you noticed that was like it just over and over again, especially for these players that would fit in that HL category, kept recommending high spin golf balls.
That's exactly right. There's a lot of background big data being collected when you swing a shaft optimizer. We will give you the 5 key numbers, but ultimately we're using that as data collection to see, do we have the proper offerings? And a couple of the parameters that optimizer measures are, it measures your shaft lean, it measures your angle of attack, and then we know what club you're hitting. So we know the loft of that golf club. So from there, we can say, do you need more spin, less spin? What's going on? And over again, because we fit so many people in a JPX hot metal, which is a strong lofted golf club, over and over again, we saw players need more spin. Overwhelmingly, our golf ball recommendation was you need the higher spin one. The other option for that is you could play the lower spin one and just have more loft. So that's another option, another thing that led to having another option that has a little bit more loft on it.
And I think I'm going to point it out. I think this is another place where the industry maybe is, putting one over on golfers, as you kind of hinted at. Because if you look again, you've noted the whole reason for HL is your data says that you have a large segment of golfers who don't hit the ball high enough. They don't hit it with enough spin, and this is the same segment of golfers that is typically sort of pushed by marketing again into lower compression soft golf balls. And while they
Yep.
do launch higher, they are
They
also
still spin.
invariably very low spin.
You're
So that
exactly
again,
right.
just pointing out this is a thing that does not make sense, that the industry is sort of pushing on golfers in a way that may not actually work to their benefit.
Yeah, it's a compounding problem, and it's that's where the ability for a person to understand and work with a good fitter who understands these dynamics and the physics behind all these, and just knowledge about what a golf ball truly does, and what it will do and what parameters are the proper parameters beyond just a total distance. It's just massive to help make sure you're utilizing the proper 14 clubs in your bag.
What about the other 2 hot metal options? Because you have Hot Metal Pro and then
Mhm.
just your straight up middle of the road, I guess, run of the mill hot metal.
Yeah,
Who are
just
those
the
Boring old
generic
hot
one, right?
metal.
boring old hot metals? Yeah, so, so who is, again, not to pigeonhole, but, a target consumer or people that are watching say, "Hey, is that one for me?"
Yeah, I mean, to me, the hot metals are distance and forgiveness combined. It's, if you were to talk, and I know we'll talk about Forge in a little bit. Forge has a lean towards feel over distance, where the hot metal, they are distance golf clubs. So the hot metal itself, it's for that. I'd call it. I've seen some even low handicaps use them, but I'd say that mid handicap player who's got at least 85 miles an hour with the driver. And then the pro is that person who wants distance, but at the same time doesn't want as thick a sole, as thick a top line, doesn't quite need as much help launching the ball. So the pro The clubs themselves are the exact same in terms of technology, other than the specs are different. The top line's thinner, it's a little bit less offset, a little thinner sole.
And you did this time around the Pro, you kinda shrunk that down a little bit, right?
We did, and that's to me when Mizuno is firing on all cylinders, it's when we make clubs more forgiving and smaller. Like, I think
Not
the part
not when you
the
break out
beauty
the orange paint.
right.
No, God, no.
That
God,
was
no.
orange and bigger. So, it's honestly, like, the fact that the Hot Metal Pro has taken off so much has allowed us to make the forged a little bit more Mizuno, a little bit more players. The first time we launched the Hot Metal Pro, if you recall back to when we did it, it was interesting because it came about 6 months after the first Hot Metal. It was an addition to the line, it wasn't, like, the start of the line, and the specs of the forged and the Hot Metal Pro at the time were virtually identical. They were right on top of each other in terms of head length, offset, all of those things. Now that the Hot Metal Pro is coming, before the Forge and with the Hot Metal, now we actually kind of separated them a little bit further. We basically kept the Hot Metal Pro where it was and took the Forge a step in the smaller direction. Thinner top line, thinner sole. We built some more speed into it with the construction, but we made it more players, particularly when you look at the scoring irons.
And there they are. Can we talk about the other two, Tony? The
Yeah,
two
go
that
for it. What do you wanna
they're
know?
not gonna, I mean, right? Interesting. Like, I'm so excited about the ones that won't sell as well, potentially, right?
Right.
Like saying the hot metal is the baby of lineup, but and maybe talk about this too. You're splitting, we're splitting kind of the releases. So even though we're talking about all these clubs now, only some of them are going to be available to people. Now the others be available kind of beginning, first part of the year, what, February-ish of
Yeah,
2023.
right.
And so maybe why the staggered release, and then let's get into what kind of those two models are.
Yeah, so
And
there's
then
a couple of reasons for the staggered launch. First, it's that the Mizuno Pro stuff, it launched this year. So, give those clubs a little bit more time to breathe. But also, you hate to talk about like supply chain side and how, build capacity and all these things, but it's a real thing in the industry right now where people are struggling for components, struggling with lead times. How long are your custom lead times and stuff like that? So we use this as an opportunity to really kind of hit the reset button and make sure that when we launch properly. Like the last thing you want is to launch a golf club, someone put in a pre-order, and then we say, "Cool, your pre-order will get here in 12 weeks." Like that's the
In time for the
stupidest
next
thing
Mizuno
going.
Pro.
Yeah,
right, right.
so we literally, we did a bunch of simulations, worked with our manufacturing side, worked with all of our component suppliers to make sure that when we launch this, we're ready to go. We're ready to hit the ground running. So with that, there was a delay in the tour and the forged. You will see it, depending on how much of a golf nerd you are. If you're listening to golf podcasts, you're probably a golf nerd. They kind of launched some in overseas a little bit before us, but their quantities aren't nearly the
I've
quantities that
seen
we
that.
do over here. Yeah,
I've seen that. I
unfortunately,
tried to order some. So
we can pretend like the world is really massive and something that launches in Japan won't make it to the States, but it took it about, I'd say, 30 seconds for my inbox to start filling up.
oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. So let's briefly talk about those. I mean, just maybe hit a couple of the highlights, revisit in February. But um, the one that I'm personally most excited about, and part of the reason I broke out my MP64 3 iron
Mhm.
is that back in the day, the MP32, MP64s, MP18 SC, this idea within Mizuno's lineup, if there's something that you could always hang your hat on, if you're a muscle back guy, great. Mizuno is going to make, you know, gorgeous, awesome feeling muscle backs, but also kind of that forged, better, forged players cavity back iron. We've kind of danced back and forth, and we had it, and then we kind of went to a multi-material kind of
Mhm.
approach with, like, some of the titanium inserts and stuff. And personally I was like, I'm not as much a fan of that look and feel as I was like the MP64 and some of that. But worry not, people, because 923 Tour is kind of that reincarnate, right?
It really is. And you're right. Like if you look at the Mizuno Pro line, which is where that model always lived, that second club in that lineup after the Muscleback, it's gone through a lot of different versions. What started as a 64, a 62, a 63, what it turned into like an MP20 MMC, and that MMC was that multi-material. You look at the Mizuno Pro right now, the 223, it's a chromoly golf club that has COR built into it. It's not just that simple CB design that so many people think of and look for. That club has turned into the JPX Tour Golf Club. That is the one piece grain flow forged, specks of a blade, just a touch more forgiveness based off of the cavity back design. But it's got everything you want from that golf club, and really, it truly does now because we actually brought the copper underlay that had only lived in the Mizuno Pro line for years. Now the copper actually lives in the JPX Tour, which is awesome.
So if you're like me, and that, I mean, you're speaking to me, that
Nobody's
was I.
like you, Chris.
Well,
No.
good point. Good point. Nobody is nickel chromoly quite like me. But that's, that's like I said, the 64s, the 62s, those are the ones that kind of hung the head on, and maybe even, when you looked at competitors' products, things that you loved. I've always loved how, like Mayura, their CB57s
Mhm.
looked, and things where you had kind of this Mount Rushmore of player CBs. And to me, Mizuno always had a face on that mountain, um, until, like you said, kind of that
Yeah.
shift and recently, but now we're back.
This is that club, and it's a staple golf club. That category of the simple one-piece forged cavity back is our most played on tour, even more so than our blades. So it's something that you're right, we kinda, like, tiptoed around and danced around where it was gonna live in the family, but there's always a place for that in the lineup just because it speaks to so many better players.
And then the forged, we got the forged piece in there, right? So we have 923 Tour and 923
Oh,
Forged
For
that again will be part of that staggered
mhm.
release,
Yeah.
in early 2023.
Yeah, the 923 Forge is an awesome golf club because it takes a lot of the distance generating technologies from the hot metal as well as the one piece grain flow forge, from the tour line, and it blends those together. It's not going to be quite as long as the hot metal, but it's got a lot of distance built into it. But the feel is there. So that's really been a staple in our lineup too, is a distance generating, forgiving forged golf club. So that one is one that you see a lot of players bridging a lot of different handicap ranges with that one.
that one is a case too where, particularly in the scoring irons, you shrunk that one down a little bit as well, correct?
Totally, and that's just it, like, now that we have the Hot Metal Pro doing what it's doing, we let the Forge get even more players. The you look at the 9-iron pitching wedge, which Mizuno still has, like, a reputation, an old school reputation of having ugly pitching wedges, which if you go
Well,
back to,
it's
like,
because you have had some ugly pitching wedges.
even, like, MP33's beautiful golf club, it was an ugly pitching wedge. Like, my first Mizuno set was a Tezoid True, ugly pitching wedge.
Oh,
But if you go
oh,
back, I mean,
hideous.
the last 10 years, our pitching
Donkey
wedges have
shovels.
gotten better and better, and now these ones are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, lower heel. I think that's the biggest thing that the old ones didn't have is that low heel design,
They
and you look
sat like this, like off the ground, like,
right.
yeah.
So, yeah, we definitely got smaller on the scoring irons, tons of feel, like, this'll speak to a wide number of players.
I love it. I love
Good
it. Tony, I
stuff.
think it's time.
All right. We're gonna do our own little version
New
of a lightning
segment.
round.
Okay,
New
What's it
segment,
called,
first time
Tony?
ever. We're gonna call
What's it
it the
called?
back nine. The back
Back
nine.
nine.
It's gonna be
I like
9
it.
questions, and fair warning, Chris, just like my back nines, it's gonna be all over the place. So you ready?
And potentially ugly at times. Here we
That's
go.
right. Chris, put 30 seconds on the clock.
Oh,
30
good.
seconds on the clock.
Oh, so I
No,
gotta
there's
answer
no
quick.
And
clock. There's no clock.
no, but
Okay.
I'm pretending.
All right,
30
here we
seconds
go.
on our virtual clock and go.
Does Rust add spin?
No, absolutely not.
In a world where Mizuno does not exist, what irons are you playing?
Ooh, ugh, that's a tough answer. I don't know. I would probably say a Titleist right now, but I don't know. I don't like them, but I'd probably play one. May maybe I'd start my own, so we'll see.
Vosh. Yeah,
All
there
right.
you go.
Complete this sentence. Everyone knows that nothing feels like a Mizuno, but did you know that nothing tastes like?
Tacos?
The correct answer was light beer and fajitas.
Oh, okay. Damn,
Keeping our theme, if you had to eat one thing for breakfast for the rest of your life, I know what it isn't.
it's not meat. I'm not eating bacon.
It's also
If
not
I had to
Japanese hotel eggs.
Oh god, yeah, I'm not eating those. If I did have to eat one thing, it's Pancake Pantry nachos from in or sorry, Pancake Pantry French toast. Sorry, I got nachos on the mind. It's right
Me
behind
too.
Vanderbilt.
Me too. I'm always
Pancake
thinking about
fancy.
nachos.
All right, we'll have to check those out. And
All right,
we're gonna
next, go. Lightning round.
staying on our food theme. What is the weirdest food you've ever eaten?
Weirdest food I've ever eat I was in China, and I'm a vegetarian, which a lot of people I've talked about that on things. So I was in China, so everyone is very, very accommodating of like, "Oh, you're a vegetarian, we'll make sure we get you the right thing." One of the questions that came out at the table was, "Are eggs okay?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, I'm okay to eat stuff with eggs in it." So they very generously brought me a bowl full of eggs, like not cooked, like eggs. So
Just raw or like
as
shell
far as
on? What
I
are we
could
talking?
tell, they were raw. So I didn't know what to do other than pretend like I was thankful and, like, take a spoon, "Oh, so good," and then just try to get to the end of dinner. So it's not even that it's that weird a thing, but I'd say raw eggs as a meal.
Done. Good
All right.
question. Next.
What is your favorite Olympic winter sport? Winter Olympic sport. There we go.
Winter Olympic sport? Um, I'd have to say in the Winter Olymp I don't watch a ton of the Winter Olympics. Oh,
There's
sh
ski.
no,
It's their
I know,
skiing.
no, I know that's I'm wrong, that's an easy answer. When Shaun White's doing the snowboarding on the half pipe.
Half pipe.
Yes,
Half pipe. All
absolutely.
right.
Shaun White on the half pipe.
All right.
Perfect. I think he just retired during the
He
last one,
he
so you'll have to
did,
come up with a new one.
but, he
Well, who's
But
ever
that kid who
somebody
beat
else will
him
have
was
pipe.
unbelievable. He's like 4 foot nothing and was getting about 70 feet in the air. It was awesome.
yes, yes.
If you could put one current player in the NFL on the Falcons roster,
Ooh. Oh, because we need a lot of help. I don't know that one's gonna do it. We need a QB. I like what Mariota has done so far. I'm excited to see what Ritter can do. Um, y- I
there's a
want
huge butt there.
you got to take Josh Allen. Like, I mean, he's just a blast to watch. I would put Allen in there because he is fun.
Bi- Bills Mafia is super excited by that answer right now.
Yep.
As
Good
yeah.
answer. Good answer. How many do we have left, Tony? How many
Two
questions?
more.
Two more. Dos mas. Here we go.
What phrase or saying really annoys you?
Hmm. What phrase or saying really annoys me? I don't know. I'm a pretty even keeled guy. I don't get that annoyed by too much. Um, yeah, I don't know the answer to that. This is the worst. I'm the worst contestant on this.
You're the first, so you're the best
Oh,
and the
okay.
worst. So
Best
it
and the
doesn't.
worst.
What phrase
Yeah.
annoys me? I don't know. When people ask me what I'm doing when I know I'm busy, like, "Hey, are you available?" Like, I hate that because I'll let with I get busy a lot, and then I like to just shut down and be in the zone, so when people say, "Oh, okay, no, you got a minute." "You got a minute's the one that annoys me because they don't want a
he's,
minute, they want an hour, so "you got
he's
a minute"
gone from
annoys
like an even keel
I
guy
know
to
to just
totally worked
rageful.
up.
me.
I'm pre-populating 4 texts to come to you today at
"You
different
got
times
a
that say,
minute."
"Hey, Vosh, you got a minute?" Yeah. So expect
Uh,
those just periodically
I mean,
throughout the day.
the guy's been at Mizuno for 15 years, so I was kind of half expecting him to go, you know what? I am just tired of hearing nothing feels like a Mizuno. Like, we gotta come up with something different. All right, we're
All
good.
right,
We're good.
Last question. Knock
I
it out
was
of the park. Here we go.
I was going to ask if blades will improve my ball striking, but we covered that. So we'll go.
My bad.
We'll go back to the food category. Super generic. French fries or onion rings?
French fries, absolutely, all day,
Ooh,
every
onion
day.
rings.
Oh
All
no,
day, every day. No,
every time
no.
French fries. I love it.
I love it. Or a bowl full of eggs. Who knows, right?
That's
Like you
right.
Oh,
gotta be flexible there.
be
Oh
careful how
man.
you answer. Are eggs okay? If you ever get asked that question.
No, they are not. I think
Look,
it's an easy answer. The answer is no.
yeah,
They are
cooked
not
eggs are
okay.
okay, which means our omelet was not okay in Japan.
See, I was going to say you seem to have had some very bad egg experiences in Asian
Right?
countries.
Oh man. Well, with that, Chris, thank you so much for your time. It's always fun to chat. People that have questions, let us know which of these Mizuno JPX 923 series irons are you most excited about? What do you want us to dig into? Tony and I are happy to answer questions, ask more questions. Vosh is very available.
He's
Ask
got
him
a
if he's
minute.
got a minute. He's always willing to take your
I can
calls and
just
give you.
picture my Twitter is gonna be full of "you gotta minutes" over the next
I hope
month
so.
or so.
I hope the 100th person that posts you got a minute is going to get a free Japanese head cover from me. So,
Maybe with some eggs in it.
and
Right.
with some eggs, find us on the interwebs at Golfspy T, at Golfspy C, Mizuno
At
out
Vosh
there.
68, right?
Vosh 68.
Let's
That's
get it.
let's get it. I
That's
appreciate your
it.
time, guys. That was a lot of fun.
Always a great time. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. We out.
Go Doors.
Go Doors.